Most people believe they are thinking for themselves, but the truth is far more uncomfortable than that. Every day, millions of people wake up and immediately surrender control of their minds. They hand their attention to fear, distractions, social media, negative thoughts, and the opinions of strangers. They move through life reacting instead of deciding. They live on autopilot without ever realizing it. And slowly, year after year, their minds become weaker. But there are a few people who choose a different path. They learn how to control their thoughts instead of being controlled by them. They learn how to stay calm in chaos, focused in distraction, strong in pain, clear in confusion. Those people understand one powerful truth. Your mind is either your greatest weapon or your worst prison, and the difference depends on whether you truly own it. If you enjoy deep self-development audiobooks that help you become mentally stronger, make sure to subscribe to the channel and join this journey of growth, discipline, and transformation. Now close your eyes for a moment, take a deep breath, and listen carefully, because this audiobook may completely change the way you see yourself. Chapter 1. The Invisible War Inside Your Head. Every human being is fighting a war that nobody else can see. A war between focus and distraction, between discipline and comfort, between fear and courage, between the person you are today and the person you could become. Most people think the biggest battles in life happen outside of them. They believe their enemies are lack of money, lack of opportunity, difficult people, or bad luck. But the truth is, the most dangerous enemy usually lives inside the mind. Your thoughts can either build your future or destroy it. One negative thought repeated every day can slowly poison your confidence. One fearful belief can stop you from chasing your dreams for years. One habit of overthinking can drain your energy until you feel mentally exhausted before the day even begins. And the worst part is that many people never realize this is happening. They wake up tired. They scroll endlessly through their phones. They compare themselves to strangers. They fill their minds with noise from morning until night. Then they wonder why they feel anxious, weak, distracted, and lost. The modern world is built to steal your attention. Every notification fights for your focus. Every advertisement tries to control your emotions. Every platform wants your time. Your mind is constantly being pulled in different directions until you no longer feel peace inside yourself. That is why mental control has become one of the rarest forms of power in the world. A person who can control their own thoughts is dangerous, because they cannot be easily manipulated, they cannot be easily distracted, they cannot be emotionally controlled by every small problem around them. They become calm, clear, focused, and powerful. But this level of control does not happen overnight. The mind is like a wild animal. If you never train it, it will control you. It will chase comfort. It will avoid pain. It will seek distraction. It will create fear even when there is no danger. This is why so many people stay stuck in cycles they hate. They want success, but their mind chooses comfort. They want confidence, but their mind feeds insecurity. They want peace, but their mind constantly searches for drama and noise. Without mental discipline, your life slowly becomes controlled by impulses instead of purpose. Think about how often people react emotionally without thinking. Someone insults them online, and they lose control instantly. A small failure happens, and they immediately believe their future is ruined. One rejection makes them question their entire worth as a person. This is what happens when the mind becomes weak. A weak mind reacts to everything. A strong mind chooses its response carefully. And that difference changes everything. Your future is not shaped only by talent. It is shaped by what controls your mind every single day. If fear controls your mind, your future becomes smaller. If distraction controls your mind, your potential disappears. If laziness controls your mind, your dreams slowly die. But if discipline controls your mind, your entire life begins to transform. The problem is that most people never stop long enough to examine their thoughts. They assume every thought they have is true. They believe every emotion deserves a reaction. They never question the patterns inside their own minds. But awareness is the beginning of freedom. The moment you start observing your thoughts instead of blindly obeying them, something powerful begins to happen. You separate yourself from the chaos. You begin realizing that not every fear deserves attention. Not every emotion deserves action. Not every thought deserves belief. This changes the way you live. Imagine waking up without instantly checking your phone. Imagine sitting in silence without needing constant stimulation. Imagine feeling stress but staying calm anyway. Imagine being able to focus deeply without your attention being destroyed every few minutes. That is real mental strength, and it gives people an enormous advantage in life. Because the world is full of distracted people, most people cannot sit alone with their thoughts for even 10 minutes. They need entertainment constantly, noise constantly, validation constantly. Silence scares them because silence forces them to face themselves. But growth begins when you stop running from your own mind. The strongest people are not always the loudest people. Often they are the calmest. They have learned how to control their emotions instead of becoming slaves to them. When pressure appears, they stay steady. When pain appears, they stay focused. When distractions appear, they stay disciplined. This inner control creates outer power. And the beautiful thing is that mental strength can be trained. Your current mindset is not permanent. Your habits are not permanent. Your fears are not permanent. The brain changes based on repetition. Whatever you repeatedly think, feel, and do becomes stronger over time. If you repeat negative thinking every day, negativity becomes your normal state. If you repeat discipline every day, discipline becomes part of your identity. This means you are constantly programming your own mind whether you realize it or not. Every action matters, every thought matters, every habit matters. And this should make you more careful about what you allow into your mind. Because your mind is like soil. Whatever you plant repeatedly will grow. If you plant distraction, weakness grows. If you plant fear, anxiety grows. If you plant discipline, strength grows. The question is simple. What are you feeding your mind every day? Many people consume endless negativity without realizing the damage it causes. Violent content, toxic arguments, constant comparison, endless scrolling. Their minds never get rest. Their attention becomes shattered into pieces. Then they wonder why they cannot focus on their goals. A distracted mind cannot build a powerful life. Deep work requires deep focus. Strong relationships require emotional control. Confidence requires mental discipline. Everything important in life depends on your ability to guide your own mind instead of letting the world guide it for you. And this is why owning your mind changes everything. Because once you control your attention, you control your direction. Once you control your emotions, you control your decisions. Once you control your habits, you control your future. This is the hidden truth most people never fully understand. Your life follows your mind. If your inner world is chaotic, your outer world eventually becomes chaotic too. But if your inner world becomes calm, focused, and disciplined, your life slowly begins changing in powerful ways. This is not magic. It is cause and effect. Every strong person you admire has learned this lesson in some form. Athletes, leaders, creators, thinkers, they all understood that external success begins with internal control, because no amount of talent can save a person with a weak mind. And no obstacle can permanently stop a person with a strong one. That is why your greatest responsibility is protecting and training your mind. Not someday, now. Because every day you delay, the world continues programming your thoughts for you. And if you never take ownership of your own mind, you may wake up one day and realize you spent your entire life living according to fear, distraction, and the expectations of other people. That realization is painful. But there is good news. The moment you become aware of the battle inside your head, you already begin taking your power back. Awareness is the first step. Discipline is the second. And transformation comes after both. Your mind can become your greatest ally, but only if you learn how to master it. And that journey begins now. Chapter 2. Why most people never control their thoughts. Most people spend their entire lives believing they are free thinkers. They believe every opinion they have belongs to them. They believe every desire comes from their own heart. They believe every thought inside their minds is true and meaningful. But if you look closely, you begin to notice something strange. Most people are not truly thinking. They are reacting. Reacting to what they see, reacting to what they hear, reacting to what the world feeds them every single day. From the moment people wake up, their minds are flooded with noise, notifications, news, opinions, videos, advertisements, messages, arguments, fear, comparison, endless stimulation without rest. And slowly, without realizing it, they lose the ability to think clearly for themselves. Their attention becomes fragmented, their emotions become unstable, their minds become crowded. This is one of the greatest problems of modern life. People have access to endless information, but very little inner clarity. And without clarity, the mind becomes easy to control. Think about how often people change their mood because of something external. One bad comment ruins their day. One social media post creates insecurity. One moment of rejection destroys their confidence. That is not control, that is dependency. A person who depends on external events to feel stable will always feel emotionally weak. Their peace disappears the moment life becomes uncomfortable. And unfortunately, this has become normal. Most people are constantly overstimulated. Their minds never rest. Even during quiet moments, they search for distraction because silence feels uncomfortable. But silence feels uncomfortable for one reason. It forces people to face the thoughts they spend all day trying to avoid. Many people are terrified of being alone with their own minds. That is why they keep themselves distracted from morning until night. Because deep down, they are carrying anxiety, regret, insecurity, fear, or emotional pain they never learned how to process. So instead of facing themselves, they escape into entertainment. But escaping your mind never strengthens it. It weakens it. Every time you avoid discomfort, your mind learns that discomfort should be feared. Every time you distract yourself from difficult emotions, your emotional strength decreases. And over time, you slowly lose control over your inner world. This is why so many people struggle with focus today. Their brains have been trained to crave constant stimulation, fast videos, short attention spans, instant pleasure, quick dopamine. The mind becomes addicted to movement and noise. Then, when it is time to focus deeply on something important, they feel restless within minutes. They cannot sit still, they cannot think clearly. They cannot stay disciplined long enough to build something meaningful. And this is exactly why controlling your thoughts has become such a rare ability. Because most people never train their minds, they only entertain them. Imagine giving someone complete control over your house. They decide what enters, what stays, what leaves. Eventually, your house no longer belongs to you. The same thing happens with the mind. If you allow random content, random opinions, random negativity, and random distractions into your head all day, eventually your thoughts stop belonging to you. Your mental environment shapes your identity. This is why protecting your mind is one of the most important responsibilities in life. Not every voice deserves access to your attention. Not every opinion deserves space in your head. Not every emotion deserves control over your actions. Strong people understand this deeply. They become careful about what they consume mentally. because they know the mind absorbs everything repeatedly exposed to it. If you constantly consume fear, your thinking becomes fearful. If you constantly consume anger, your mind becomes angry. If you constantly consume negativity, your worldview becomes negative. Your brain is always adapting to what you repeatedly feed it. And many people are feeding their minds poison every day without realizing it. They surround themselves with drama. They obsess over bad news. They compare themselves endlessly to people online. They fill their minds with unrealistic standards and artificial lifestyles. Then they wonder why they feel empty inside. The human mind was never designed to process this much noise continuously. That is why people feel mentally exhausted, even when they have done nothing physically difficult. Their minds are overloaded. Too much information, too much stimulation, too much comparison, too much emotional chaos. And without realizing it, they become mentally weaker over time. A weak mind seeks comfort constantly. It avoids challenge, it avoids silence, it avoids discipline, it avoids responsibility. But a strong mind understands something important. Growth is uncomfortable. Real transformation requires discomfort. You cannot become mentally powerful while constantly chasing ease. Discipline feels hard in the beginning because the brain prefers familiar patterns. Even destructive habits can feel comfortable simply because they are familiar. That is why change feels difficult. The brain wants efficiency, not greatness. It wants survival, not transformation. Your higher self wants growth. Your lower instincts want comfort. And every single day, those two forces compete inside you. This is the invisible battle most people never notice. One part of you wants to become stronger. Another part wants to stay safe and comfortable forever. One part wants discipline. Another part wants instant pleasure. One part wants focus. Another part wants distraction. The outcome of your life depends on which side you feed more often. Most people feed weakness every day. They delay difficult tasks. They avoid responsibility. They give in to every craving instantly. They let emotions control their behavior. And because of that, they never build true mental power. Mental strength is built through resistance. Every time you resist distraction, you become stronger. Every time you stay calm under pressure, you become stronger. Every time you control an emotional impulse, you become stronger. Every time you choose discipline over comfort, your mind evolves. But modern life teaches the opposite. It teaches instant gratification, instant entertainment, instant pleasure, instant validation. People are losing the ability to tolerate boredom, silence, and delayed rewards. And this creates emotional weakness, because life will always contain discomfort. There will always be uncertainty. There will always be pain. There will always be moments when motivation disappears. If your mind collapses every time life becomes difficult, you will never reach your potential. This is why emotional control matters so much. Controlling your thoughts does not mean becoming emotionless. It means learning how to experience emotions without becoming controlled by them. Fear may appear, stress may appear, doubt may appear, but you no longer obey every emotion automatically. You observe it, you understand it. Then you choose your response carefully. That is real power. A calm mind can think clearly even during chaos. A disciplined mind can continue moving forward even during discomfort. A focused mind can achieve extraordinary things because its energy is not constantly scattered. This is why mastering your mind changes every area of life. Relationships improve because you stop reacting emotionally to everything. Work improves because your focus becomes stronger. Confidence improves because you trust yourself more deeply. Peace improves because your inner world becomes quieter. Most people search for control outside themselves. They want to control circumstances, control other people, control outcomes. But the strongest people focus first on controlling themselves. Because once you control your own mind, The external world loses much of its power over you. Insults lose power. Failure loses power. Rejection loses power. Distractions lose power. You stop being easily shaken by temporary events, and that emotional stability creates enormous strength. But this level of control requires awareness. You must begin noticing your patterns honestly. Notice what weakens your focus. Notice what steals your energy. Notice which habits make your mind stronger and which habits make it weaker. Most people never pause long enough to study themselves honestly. They remain unconscious of their own patterns for years. But self-awareness is where transformation begins. When you observe your thoughts carefully, you begin separating truth from impulse. You realize that not every thought deserves belief. Not every fear predicts reality. Not every craving deserves satisfaction. This creates space between you and your impulses. And inside that space, freedom begins to grow. Because real freedom is not doing whatever you feel like doing. Real freedom is having control over yourself. A person addicted to distraction is not free. A person controlled by anger is not free. A person ruled by fear is not free. Freedom begins when your mind obeys your higher intentions instead of your temporary emotions. That is why mental discipline matters so much. It determines whether you become the master of your life or a prisoner of your impulses. And the truth is simple. Most people never control their thoughts because they never train themselves to. They allow the world to think for them, feel for them, decide for them, distract them endlessly. But you do not have to live that way. You can train your attention, you can strengthen your focus, you can build emotional control. You can create a calmer, clearer, more disciplined mind. And once you begin doing that, your entire life starts changing from the inside out. Because when you finally own your mind, you stop living accidentally, you start living intentionally. Chapter 3: The Addiction to Distraction. One of the most dangerous addictions in the modern world is not alcohol, drugs, or gambling. It is distraction. And the frightening part is that most people do not even realize they are addicted to it. Every moment of silence feels uncomfortable. Every moment of boredom feels unbearable. Every free second must be filled with something: a video, a notification, a message, a scroll through social media. Constant stimulation from morning until night. People no longer know how to simply sit still with their own thoughts. And because of that, their minds are becoming weaker every single day. The modern world profits from your distraction. Every app is designed to capture your attention for as long as possible. Every platform competes for your focus. Entire industries are built around keeping your mind stimulated constantly. Because attention has become one of the most valuable things on earth, where attention goes, energy follows. And where energy goes, life follows. If your attention is constantly scattered, your life eventually becomes scattered too. This is why so many people feel mentally exhausted today, even when they have not done anything physically demanding. Their minds never rest. Their brains are overloaded with noise, thousands of images, hundreds of thoughts, endless comparisons, constant emotional stimulation. The human brain was never designed to process this much information continuously, and yet people expose themselves to it every single day, without questioning the consequences. The result is mental chaos. People cannot focus deeply anymore. They struggle to read for long periods. They struggle to work without checking their phones. They struggle to have quiet moments without feeling restless. Even conversations are affected. People listen for a few seconds before their minds drift somewhere else. Attention spans are shrinking because distraction is becoming a lifestyle. And the scary part is that distraction feels harmless in the moment. Scrolling for a few minutes does not feel dangerous. Watching random videos does not feel destructive. Checking notifications every few minutes feels normal. But small, repeated distractions slowly rewire the brain. They train the mind to avoid deep focus. They train the mind to crave instant stimulation. They train the mind to become impatient. Over time, this destroys the ability to concentrate on meaningful goals. Great things require deep focus. Building a business requires focus. Learning a skill requires focus. Improving your body requires focus. Creating a peaceful life requires focus. Everything meaningful in life grows through sustained attention. But distraction steals that attention little by little, until years disappear without real progress. This is why many people feel stuck, not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack talent, but because their focus is constantly broken. A distracted mind struggles to create a powerful life, and unfortunately, many people have become emotionally dependent on stimulation. The moment silence appears, they immediately reach for their phones. The moment discomfort appears, they search for escape. The moment boredom appears, they distract themselves instantly. But boredom itself is not the enemy. In many ways, boredom is necessary. Because boredom forces the brain to slow down, it creates space for reflection, space for creativity, space for deeper thinking. Some of the greatest ideas in human history were born during quiet moments. But today, silence rarely exists. People fear being alone with themselves, because when the noise disappears, unresolved emotions begin to surface. Anxiety appears, loneliness appears, self-doubt appears, and instead of facing those feelings, many people escape back into distraction. But escaping discomfort does not solve it, it only delays it. This creates a cycle. The more people distract themselves, the weaker their emotional tolerance becomes. And the weaker their emotional tolerance becomes, the more they need distraction to avoid discomfort. Eventually, they lose the ability to sit peacefully with their own minds. This is why mental discipline has become such a rare form of power. A person who can sit in silence without craving stimulation has enormous control over themselves. A person who can focus deeply in a distracted world gains a massive advantage. A person who can resist instant pleasure becomes capable of building long-term success. Focus is becoming a superpower. And the people who learn how to protect their attention will dominate the future. Think about how much life changes when your focus improves. You make better decisions. You finish what you start. You think more clearly. You become calmer emotionally. Your confidence grows because you trust your ability to stay disciplined. Everything begins improving because your energy is no longer scattered everywhere. This is why protecting your attention is not a small thing. It is life-changing. Every day you are either strengthening your focus or weakening it. Every moment of discipline trains the brain. Every moment of impulsive distraction trains it too. The brain adapts to repetition. If you constantly interrupt your focus, your brain learns distraction. If you practice sustained concentration, your brain learns focus. This means your daily habits are literally shaping the structure of your mind. That realization should make you more intentional about how you spend your time. Most people treat attention casually, but attention determines the quality of your life. Whatever controls your attention eventually controls your future. If negativity controls your attention, negativity grows stronger inside you. If fear controls your attention, fear shapes your decisions. If distractions control your attention, your goals slowly disappear. But if purpose controls your attention, your life gains direction. One focused hour is often more valuable than an entire distracted day. This is why successful people protect their focus aggressively. They understand that attention is limited, energy is limited, time is limited, and wasting those things carelessly creates regret later in life. Imagine reaching old age and realizing you spent years consuming endless distractions instead of building the life you truly wanted. That pain is becoming increasingly common. People are busy all day, but accomplish very little that truly matters. They move constantly but feel empty inside, because movement is not the same as progress. Being stimulated is not the same as being fulfilled. Distraction creates the illusion of activity while stealing real growth. And this is why many people feel lost today. Their minds are filled with noise but empty of purpose. They consume endlessly but create very little. They react constantly but reflect very rarely. Owning your mind requires breaking this cycle. It requires learning how to become comfortable with stillness again. It requires learning how to focus deeply again. It requires learning how to protect your attention from unnecessary noise. At first, this feels uncomfortable. Silence feels strange. Stillness feels boring. The mind craves stimulation because it has been trained to expect it constantly. But if you stay patient, something powerful begins happening. Your thoughts become clearer. Your emotions become calmer. Your focus becomes stronger. Your inner world becomes less chaotic. And slowly you begin feeling mentally free again. This is one of the greatest rewards of discipline: peace. Real peace does not come from constant entertainment. It comes from mental clarity. A disciplined mind experiences life differently. Simple moments become enjoyable again. Conversations become deeper. Work becomes more meaningful. Thinking becomes clearer. The brain no longer feels overloaded every second of the day. This creates emotional stability. And emotional stability creates strength. The strongest minds are not addicted to constant stimulation. They know how to disconnect. They know how to sit quietly. They know how to focus on what truly matters. This is becoming increasingly rare in modern society, but rarity creates value, and a focused mind is incredibly valuable. Because focus allows transformation. Without focus, goals remain dreams. Without focus, discipline collapses. Without focus, potential stays trapped inside you forever. That is why reclaiming your attention is one of the most important things you can do for your future. You must become intentional about what enters your mind. Not everything deserves your energy. Not everything deserves your attention. Not everything deserves your emotional reaction. The world will always try to distract you. There will always be more noise, more stimulation, more entertainment, more opinions. But mental strength grows when you choose what deserves your focus carefully. This does not mean abandoning technology completely. It means using it consciously instead of compulsively. There is a difference between using tools and becoming controlled by them, and many people today are being controlled without realizing it. Their moods depend on notifications. Their confidence depends on likes. Their attention belongs to algorithms instead of themselves. That is not freedom. Real freedom begins when you can put the phone down and still feel at peace. When you can sit alone without needing constant stimulation. When you can focus on one task without your mind begging for distraction. That is real mental ownership. And the beautiful thing is that focus can be rebuilt, attention can be trained, mental clarity can return. But it requires discipline, it requires awareness, and it requires the courage to separate yourself from constant noise. Because when distraction loses control over your mind, your true power finally begins to appear. Chapter 4. Your mind is being programmed every day. Whether you realize it or not, your mind is being programmed every single day. Every conversation you hear, every image you consume, every song you repeat, every video you watch, every thought you entertain, every habit you practice, all of it shapes the person you are slowly becoming. Most people think transformation happens through one big moment. They believe change arrives suddenly like lightning. But real transformation usually happens quietly, through repetition. The small things you expose yourself to every day slowly become your identity. This is why two people can live in the same world but develop completely different lives. One person becomes disciplined, another becomes distracted. One becomes calm, another becomes anxious. One grows mentally strong, another becomes emotionally weak. The difference often comes down to what they repeatedly allow into their minds. Your brain is always learning, always adapting, always absorbing patterns. Even when you are not paying attention consciously, your mind is being shaped beneath the surface. That is why environment matters so much. The people around you affect your thinking. The content you consume affects your thinking. The habits you repeat affect your thinking. And eventually, your thinking affects your entire life. This is why protecting your mind is not optional. It is necessary. Imagine planting seeds in a garden every single day. If you plant strong seeds carefully, healthy plants begin to grow. But if you fill the soil with poison and weeds, destruction spreads slowly across the entire garden. Your mind works the same way. Whatever you repeatedly feed grows stronger. Fear grows through repetition. Confidence grows through repetition. Discipline grows through repetition. Weakness grows through repetition too. Most people underestimate the power of repetition because the changes happen slowly. One day of negativity may not seem dangerous. One day of laziness may not seem important. One day of distraction may feel harmless. But repeated daily for years, those patterns shape your identity. This is how people accidentally create lives they never wanted. Not through one massive mistake, but through small, unconscious habits repeated over time. Every day, the brain strengthens whatever pathways you use most often. If you constantly complain, your brain becomes more skilled at negativity. If you constantly panic under stress, your brain becomes more reactive to pressure. If you constantly seek distraction, your focus weakens. The brain adapts to what you practice. And unfortunately, modern society trains people to practice mental weakness constantly. People are trained to react instantly instead of thinking deeply. They are trained to chase pleasure instead of purpose. They are trained to seek validation instead of self-respect. They are trained to consume endlessly instead of creating. And after years of repetition, many people no longer feel connected to themselves. Their minds become crowded with the voices of everyone else. This is why so many people struggle to hear their own inner voice clearly. They spend so much time absorbing outside opinions that they forget how to think independently. But owning your mind means becoming intentional about your mental programming. It means asking difficult questions. What am I feeding my brain every day? What kind of thoughts dominate my inner world? What habits are shaping my future? Are my daily actions making me mentally stronger or mentally weaker? Most people avoid these questions because honest self-awareness can feel uncomfortable. But growth always begins with truth. You cannot change patterns you refuse to acknowledge. The first step toward mental ownership is becoming conscious of your current programming. Notice your automatic thoughts. Notice your emotional reactions. Notice your habits during stress. Notice where your attention naturally goes. These patterns reveal the condition of your mind. A person with a disciplined mind reacts differently to life than a person with an undisciplined one. When problems appear, disciplined people stay calmer. When discomfort appears, they tolerate it better. When distractions appear, they resist more easily. Not because they were born special, but because they trained themselves differently over time. Mental strength is built through conditioning. Every difficult choice strengthens your mind slightly. Every act of discipline rewires your brain. Every moment of emotional control creates new patterns inside you. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. Small, disciplined actions repeated daily are more powerful than occasional bursts of motivation. Motivation fades quickly. Programming lasts. A person who depends only on motivation will struggle to stay consistent because emotions constantly change. Some days you feel inspired, other days you feel tired. Some days you feel confident, other days you feel uncertain. But discipline allows action even when emotions fluctuate. And repeated disciplined action slowly transforms identity itself. At first, discipline feels unnatural. That is because the brain prefers familiar behavior. Even destructive habits can feel comfortable simply because they are known. But if you continue repeating new behaviors long enough, the brain adapts. What once felt difficult becomes normal. This is how transformation happens. Not instantly, but gradually. One repeated decision at a time. Think about someone who exercises consistently. In the beginning, working out feels painful and uncomfortable, but over time, the body adapts. discipline becomes part of their identity. The same thing happens mentally. The more you practice focus, the stronger your focus becomes. The more you practice calmness, the calmer your mind becomes. The more you practice emotional control, the more stable you become under pressure. Your mind is always adapting to what you repeatedly do. This should give you hope, because it means your current mindset is not permanent. You are not trapped by your old patterns forever. You can reprogram yourself intentionally. But to do that, you must become more selective about what enters your mind. Not all information deserves access to your thoughts. Not all people deserve influence over your emotions. Not all entertainment deserves your attention. Many people allow negativity into their minds constantly without questioning the impact. Toxic arguments, fear-driven news, endless comparison online, people who constantly complain. Slowly, this creates emotional heaviness inside them. Then they wonder why they feel anxious and exhausted all the time. Your mind absorbs energy from what surrounds it repeatedly. This is why peaceful environments matter. This is why strong friendships matter. This is why healthy habits matter. Everything around you either strengthens your mind or weakens it. And once you understand this, you stop treating your attention casually. You become protective of your inner world, because your inner world eventually becomes your outer reality. A person with chaotic thoughts often creates a chaotic life. A person with disciplined thoughts often creates a disciplined life. The external world reflects the internal world more than most people realize. That is why self-control matters so much. Without self-control, outside influences control you. Advertising controls you. Peer pressure controls you. Social trends control you. Temporary emotions control you. But when you begin consciously programming your own mind, something powerful changes. You stop living reactively. You begin living intentionally. You choose your habits carefully. You choose your focus carefully. You choose your influences carefully. And slowly, your identity evolves. This process requires patience. Many people quit too early because they expect immediate transformation. But deep change takes time. Years of mental conditioning cannot disappear overnight. The brain changes through repetition, not sudden emotional moments. This is why daily discipline matters more than occasional inspiration. Every day is a vote for the person you are becoming. Every thought strengthens a pattern. Every action reinforces an identity. Every habit shapes your future. And this should make you realize something important. Your life is not being shaped only by big decisions. It is being shaped by small, repeated behaviors happening every single day. This means your future is being created right now, in your routines, in your habits, in your thoughts, in your attention. The person you become 5 years from now is being programmed today. That is why awareness matters, because once you become aware of your mental programming, you gain the power to change it. You stop operating unconsciously. You stop blindly following destructive patterns. You begin choosing growth deliberately. And over time, those choices create a completely different life, a stronger life, a calmer life, a more focused life, a more disciplined life. Because when you finally take control of what programs your mind, you begin taking control of your destiny itself. Chapter 5. The Power of Silence and Observation. Most people are constantly surrounded by noise. Noise from phones, noise from conversations, noise from social media, noise from entertainment, noise from endless opinions. And because of this constant stimulation, many people have lost something extremely important: the ability to hear themselves think. Silence has become rare in the modern world. And yet silence is one of the most powerful tools for mental clarity, because when the noise disappears, the truth begins to appear. At first, silence can feel uncomfortable. Many people avoid it completely. The moment they are alone, they immediately reach for a screen. They play music, they scroll through videos, they search for distraction. Not because they enjoy it deeply, but because silence forces them to face what they have been avoiding: their fears, their anxiety, their loneliness, their confusion, their unresolved emotions. Distraction hides those feelings temporarily. Silence reveals them. And that is exactly why silence is so valuable. You cannot heal what you refuse to face. You cannot understand your mind if you never slow down long enough to observe it. Most people move through life reacting automatically. They never pause to examine their own thoughts. They never ask why they feel the way they feel. They never question their emotional patterns. They simply react. Someone criticizes them, and they become angry immediately. Something stressful happens, and panic takes over instantly. A difficult emotion appears, and they escape into distraction without thinking. This is unconscious living, and unconscious living creates suffering. But observation changes everything. The moment you begin observing your mind instead of blindly obeying it, you create distance between yourself and your impulses. That distance is where self-control begins. Imagine standing beside a river instead of being swept away by it. That is what observation does for the mind. Instead of drowning inside every thought and emotion, you begin watching them calmly. You notice fear without becoming consumed by it. You notice anger without exploding. You notice insecurity without letting it define you. This is a powerful skill, and like all powerful skills, it must be trained. Most people believe they are their thoughts. If their mind says they are weak, they believe it. If their mind says they will fail, they accept it as truth. If their mind creates anxiety, they assume danger must be real. But thoughts are not always reality. Many thoughts are simply mental habits built through repetition and conditioning. A person who constantly thinks negatively eventually trains their brain to search for problems everywhere. A person who constantly expects rejection begins seeing rejection even where it does not exist. A person who constantly feeds fear strengthens fearful thinking patterns over time. This is why observation matters, because once you begin watching your thoughts carefully, you realize something important. Not every thought deserves belief. Some thoughts come from fear. Some come from insecurity. Some come from old emotional wounds. Some come from exhaustion or stress. If you react automatically to every thought, your life becomes emotionally chaotic. But observation creates calmness. You begin asking yourself better questions. Is this thought actually true? Is this fear helping me? Am I reacting emotionally or rationally? Why does this situation affect me so strongly? These questions create awareness, and awareness weakens unconscious patterns. This is one reason why highly disciplined people often appear calmer than others. They have learned how to pause before reacting. That pause changes everything. Most emotional mistakes happen because people react too quickly. They speak without thinking. They act without reflecting. They allow temporary emotions to control permanent decisions. Then later they regret it. But silence trains patience. Silence trains emotional control. Silence trains awareness. A calm mind sees clearly. A reactive mind sees distortion everywhere. This is why silence is not weakness, it is strength. A person who can remain calm and observant during emotional situations has enormous power. Because emotional people are predictable. They react impulsively, they lose control easily. But calm people remain centered. They think before acting. They observe before speaking. They stay steady under pressure. This creates respect naturally. And more importantly, it creates inner peace. Many people spend years searching for peace externally. They believe peace will come from money, relationships, success, or approval from others. But real peace begins inside the mind, and silence helps you reconnect with that inner world. When you spend time alone without distraction, your mind slowly becomes clearer. At first, hidden emotions may surface. You may notice anxiety you ignored for years. You may notice how exhausted your mind truly feels. You may notice how dependent you became on constant stimulation. But if you stay patient, something beautiful begins to happen. Your thoughts slow down. Your breathing slows down. Your nervous system relaxes. Your awareness deepens. And slowly, you begin hearing your true inner voice again beneath all the noise. This is why solitude can be transformative. Not loneliness, but intentional solitude. There is a difference. Loneliness feels empty because you feel disconnected from others. Solitude feels powerful because you reconnect with yourself. The strongest people often spend time alone intentionally, not because they hate people, but because silence strengthens clarity. Great thinkers throughout history valued silence deeply because deep thinking requires space, creativity requires space, self-understanding requires space. Modern life rarely gives people that space anymore. Everyone is distracted constantly, and because of that, many people no longer understand themselves deeply. They know what the world wants from them, but they do not know who they truly are. Silence helps reveal that. When external noise fades, your deeper values become clearer. You begin understanding what truly matters to you. You begin seeing which habits are hurting you. You begin recognizing which relationships drain your energy. You begin noticing the patterns controlling your emotions. Observation brings truth into the light, and truth creates transformation. This is why meditation, reflection, journaling, and quiet walks can feel so powerful. Not because they magically solve problems, but because they train awareness. They strengthen your ability to observe yourself calmly, and the more aware you become, the more control you gain over your life. Because unconscious patterns lose power once they are clearly seen. Think about someone who loses control of their anger constantly. If they never examine that anger honestly, the pattern continues automatically for years. But once they begin observing the trigger carefully, they create an opportunity to change. Awareness interrupts automatic behavior. This is why observation is one of the foundations of self-mastery. You cannot control what you refuse to notice. Most people want change without awareness. They want confidence without understanding their insecurities. They want peace without understanding their chaos. They want discipline without understanding their impulses. But transformation always begins with observation. You must learn your own mind. You must notice what weakens you. Notice what strengthens you. Notice what steals your peace. Notice what improves your focus. The better you understand yourself, the more intentionally you can shape your life. And silence gives you the space to do that. This is why silence should not be feared. It should be respected. Because silence exposes truth, and truth creates freedom. A person who avoids silence often avoids themselves. But a person who can sit quietly with their thoughts develops emotional strength that many people never experience. They stop needing constant distraction. They stop fearing stillness. They stop running from themselves. And slowly, they develop something rare: inner stability. The world becomes less overwhelming because their peace no longer depends entirely on external conditions. They carry calmness inside themselves. This is one of the greatest forms of power a human being can develop. Not loudness, not aggression, not endless activity, but calm awareness. Because a calm mind can think clearly. A calm mind can resist impulses. A calm mind can make wise decisions under pressure, and a calm mind is far more difficult for the world to control. That is why silence matters so deeply. It reconnects you with yourself. It strengthens observation. It sharpens awareness. And in that quiet space, you slowly begin taking ownership of your mind again. Chapter 6. How fear controls your decisions. Fear is one of the most powerful forces inside the human mind. It can protect you, but it can also imprison you. And for many people, fear silently controls their entire lives without them fully realizing it. It controls the opportunities they avoid, the dreams they never chase, the words they never say, the risks they never take, the person they never become. Most people think fear always looks dramatic. They imagine fear as panic, danger, or extreme anxiety. But often, fear appears quietly. It hides behind excuses. It hides behind procrastination. It hides behind comfort. It hides behind the sentence people repeat every day. I'll do it later. But later often means never. Fear convinces people to stay where life feels safe and familiar, even when they are deeply unhappy there. Because the mind naturally wants certainty. The unknown feels dangerous to the brain. Even when someone's current life is painful, the brain often prefers familiar pain over unfamiliar change. This is why people stay trapped in jobs they hate, relationships that drain them, habits that weaken them, cycles that destroy their confidence. Fear whispers the same thing again and again. Stay where it feels safe. But safety and growth rarely exist in the same place. Everything meaningful in life requires stepping into uncertainty. Confidence requires uncertainty. Success requires uncertainty. Transformation requires uncertainty. There is no growth without discomfort, and yet most people spend their lives trying to avoid discomfort completely. They avoid rejection, they avoid failure, they avoid embarrassment, they avoid difficult conversations, they avoid challenges that could reveal their weaknesses. But avoiding fear does not eliminate it. Avoidance strengthens fear. Every time you run from something that scares you, your brain learns that the fear must be dangerous. And over time, the fear grows larger inside your mind. This is why small fears can slowly become life-controlling limitations. Someone avoids speaking in public once because of nervousness. Then they avoid it again and again. Eventually, their mind becomes convinced they are incapable of public speaking entirely. But the fear was strengthened through avoidance, not reality. This happens constantly in human life. People become trapped not by actual limitations, but by repeated emotional conditioning. Fear teaches them to shrink themselves, to play small, to avoid risk, to stay invisible. And slowly, they stop trusting themselves. This is one of the saddest things fear can do to a person. It disconnects them from their own potential. Deep inside, many people know they are capable of more. They know they could build a different life. They know they could become stronger, healthier, more disciplined, more confident. But fear keeps them frozen. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of not being good enough, fear of what other people might think. And unfortunately, the modern world intensifies these fears constantly. Social media creates endless comparison. People compare their private struggles to other people's public highlights. They see success without seeing the years of failure behind it. They see confidence without seeing the insecurity people overcame to develop it. This creates unrealistic expectations, and unrealistic expectations create fear. People become terrified of imperfection. They believe they must succeed immediately or not begin at all. But mastery never begins with perfection. Every skilled person was once inexperienced. Every confident person was once uncertain. Every strong person was once weak. Growth always starts with discomfort. This is why courage matters so much. Courage does not mean feeling no fear. Courage means acting despite fear. The absence of fear is not strength. Control over fear is strength. A courageous person still feels nervous, still feels uncertain, still feels discomfort, but they move forward anyway. That is what separates mentally strong people from mentally weak ones. Weak minds obey fear immediately. Strong minds acknowledge fear but refuse to surrender to it. And this difference changes the direction of entire lives. Fear often lies to people. It exaggerates danger. It predicts humiliation. It imagines disaster. The mind creates catastrophic stories about the future before anything has even happened. This is especially true for people trapped in overthinking. They mentally rehearse failure repeatedly. They imagine rejection repeatedly. They create worst-case scenarios inside their heads constantly. And eventually, these imagined fears begin feeling real. But most fears never happen the way the mind predicts. And even when failure does happen, people are usually stronger than they expected. This is one of the great lessons of life. You become stronger by facing difficulty, not avoiding it. Every challenge you survive increases your confidence. Every fear you confront weakens fear's control over your mind. Every uncomfortable step expands your sense of possibility. Confidence is not built through comfort, it is built through action. Many people wait to feel confident before taking action, but confidence usually appears after action, not before it. The first workout feels uncomfortable, the first speech feels uncomfortable, the first difficult conversation feels uncomfortable. The first attempt at anything meaningful usually feels uncomfortable. That discomfort is normal. It does not mean you are incapable. It means you are growing. Unfortunately, many people misunderstand discomfort completely. The moment something feels difficult emotionally, they assume they should stop. But discomfort is often a sign that transformation is beginning. The mind resists change because change threatens familiar patterns. Even unhealthy habits can feel emotionally safe simply because they are known. That is why discipline often feels unnatural in the beginning. You are challenging old conditioning. You are teaching the brain a new way to respond. And this process requires patience. Fear loses power gradually through repeated exposure. The more you face discomfort calmly, the more resilient your mind becomes. Imagine someone terrified of deep water. If they avoid water forever, the fear remains powerful. But if they slowly expose themselves to it repeatedly, the brain begins learning that survival is possible. The same principle applies psychologically. Fear shrinks when confronted consistently. Avoidance feeds it. Action weakens it. This is why mentally strong people deliberately challenge themselves sometimes. They train resilience intentionally. Cold showers, difficult workouts, hard conversations, deep focus, silence, discipline. These practices strengthen the mind because they teach the brain an important lesson. Discomfort is survivable. And once the mind learns that lesson deeply, fear loses much of its control. You stop panicking every time life becomes uncomfortable. You stop running from uncertainty automatically. You begin trusting yourself more. This creates inner freedom. Because fear controls people most effectively when they doubt their own ability to handle difficulty. But once you prove to yourself repeatedly that you can survive challenges, your confidence becomes more stable. You no longer need perfect conditions to function. You no longer collapse under pressure as easily. This does not mean life becomes painless. Fear never disappears completely. Even strong people feel fear. But mentally strong people understand something important. Fear is a feeling, not a command. You do not have to obey every fearful thought your mind produces. You can feel nervous and still act. You can feel uncertain and still move forward. You can feel discomfort and still stay disciplined. This realization changes everything, because once you stop treating fear like an authority, it loses much of its power over your life. Most limitations exist first in the mind. People convince themselves they cannot change, cannot grow, cannot succeed, cannot become disciplined, cannot heal, cannot rebuild themselves. But many of these beliefs were created through fear and repetition, not objective truth. The mind believes what it hears repeatedly. This is why self-talk matters. If you constantly repeat weakness to yourself, your identity slowly becomes weaker. If you constantly tell yourself that you are incapable, fear gains strength. But if you begin reinforcing courage, discipline, and resilience, your mindset slowly changes too. Mental programming works both ways. Fear can condition weakness, or courage can condition strength. And every day your choices determine which direction your mind moves toward. This is why facing fear matters so deeply, not because courage guarantees success, but because fear guarantees limitation. A life controlled entirely by fear becomes small, predictable, restricted. But a life guided by courage expands. It grows, it evolves, it discovers new possibilities. The people you admire most are not fearless people. They are people who acted despite fear repeatedly. And through those actions, they transformed themselves. You can do the same. The fear inside you is not proof of weakness. It is proof that growth is standing nearby. And if you learn to walk toward discomfort instead of away from it, you begin taking back control of your mind, your future, and your life itself. Chapter 7. Destroying the habit of overthinking. Overthinking is one of the quietest ways a person destroys their own peace. It does not make noise. It does not look dangerous from the outside, but inside the mind, it creates constant tension, confusion, and emotional exhaustion. Most people do not realize they are overthinking. They simply believe they are trying to figure things out. But in reality, their mind is stuck in repetitive loops that go nowhere. The same thoughts, the same worries, the same fears, replayed again and again, without any real progress. Overthinking feels like thinking deeply, but it is actually the opposite. Real thinking leads to clarity. Overthinking leads to confusion. When you think clearly, you move toward decisions. When you overthink, you move in circles. And the longer you stay in those circles, the more mentally drained you become. This is why many people feel tired, even when they have done nothing physically demanding. Their mind has been running non-stop in the background, analyzing every situation, predicting every outcome, replaying every mistake, imagining every possible failure. And instead of solving problems, they multiply them. Overthinking often begins with uncertainty. A situation feels unclear, a decision feels difficult, a future feels unpredictable. And instead of accepting that uncertainty is normal, the mind tries to eliminate it completely. But the human mind was never designed to know everything in advance. Life is uncertain by nature, and trying to control every possible outcome creates mental pressure that never ends. The more you try to predict everything, the more anxious you become. Because the mind cannot handle infinite possibilities at once, it becomes overloaded. This is where anxiety often grows, not from reality itself, but from excessive mental simulation of reality. People begin imagining worst-case scenarios that have not happened. They replay past mistakes repeatedly, hoping to find a different outcome in their thoughts. They analyze conversations long after they are finished. They question every decision until it loses meaning. And slowly, their mental energy is consumed by thoughts that do not lead anywhere useful. Overthinking creates the illusion of control. It makes a person feel like they are solving something, but in truth, they are just stuck. Real control comes from action, not endless thinking. A decision, even if imperfect, often brings more clarity than hours of mental debate. Because action reveals reality. Thinking alone cannot do that. This is why people who take action often appear more confident, not because they think less, but because they get feedback from reality faster. They learn, adjust, and move forward. While overthinkers remain trapped inside their own minds, trying to solve life without actually experiencing it. One of the biggest reasons people overthink is fear of making mistakes. They believe that if they think long enough, they can avoid failure completely. But this belief is false. No amount of thinking can eliminate risk. No amount of analysis can guarantee perfect outcomes. Life does not offer certainty. It offers experience, and experience only comes through action. Overthinking also comes from lack of self-trust. When a person does not trust their ability to handle outcomes, they try to control every detail mentally. They believe they must predict everything to stay safe. But this creates mental pressure that becomes overwhelming. The more you try to control everything in your mind, the less control you actually feel. Because your attention is scattered across too many possibilities, one thought leads to another, then another, then another, until the mind becomes noisy and unstable. This is why overthinking often happens at night. When the world becomes quiet, the mind becomes loud. Without external distractions, internal noise becomes more noticeable. Thoughts that were ignored during the day suddenly appear stronger, and the mind continues looping through them without direction. But understanding overthinking is the first step toward breaking it. Because overthinking is not something you are forced to obey. It is a habit, and like all habits, it can be changed. The first shift is awareness. You must begin noticing when your mind starts looping instead of solving. Ask yourself a simple question internally. Is this thought leading to action or just repetition? If it is repetition, it is not useful thinking. It is mental noise. Another important realization is that most thoughts do not require immediate response. Just because a thought appears does not mean it needs attention. The mind generates thoughts constantly, but you are not required to engage with all of them. Some thoughts are random, some are emotional, some are based on old fears. Some are simply mental habits repeating themselves, but overthinkers often treat every thought as important. They analyze everything equally. This is what creates overwhelm. Mental strength comes from selection, choosing which thoughts deserve attention and which do not. Not every idea needs to be explored. Not every fear needs to be answered. Not every possibility needs to be analyzed. Sometimes the healthiest response is to let the thought pass without engaging with it. This does not mean ignoring important problems. It means not feeding unnecessary mental loops. Another powerful truth is that clarity often comes after action, not before it. Many people wait for complete clarity before making decisions, but clarity is often a result of movement. When you start acting, even in small ways, uncertainty begins to reduce naturally. The mind becomes less chaotic because reality starts providing answers. Overthinking thrives in inaction. Action dissolves confusion. This is why even small steps matter. A simple decision can break a long mental loop. Once movement begins, the mind shifts from imagination to reality. And reality is always easier to handle than endless speculation. Overthinking also weakens confidence over time. Because every time you overanalyze a situation, you reinforce doubt. You teach your mind that you cannot trust yourself to decide quickly, and this creates hesitation in future decisions. The longer this pattern continues, the more uncertain you become in everyday life. Even simple choices start feeling difficult because your mind has been trained to doubt everything. But confidence grows when you make decisions and live through them. Even imperfect decisions build mental strength because they teach you that you can handle outcomes. This reduces fear of future decisions, and gradually, overthinking begins to weaken. One of the most important shifts is learning to tolerate uncertainty. You do not need to know everything in advance. You do not need to predict every outcome. You do not need to solve every possibility in your mind. Uncertainty is a normal part of life, and the more you accept it, the calmer your mind becomes. People who struggle most with overthinking are often those who resist uncertainty the most. But mentally strong people understand something different. They are willing to move forward even without complete answers. They trust their ability to adjust as life unfolds. This trust reduces mental pressure significantly because the mind no longer feels responsible for controlling everything. Another key point is that overthinking often hides emotional discomfort. Sometimes the mind keeps thinking because it is avoiding feeling something deeper: fear, regret, loneliness, insecurity. Instead of feeling these emotions directly, the mind tries to solve them through thinking. But emotions are not solved through logic alone. They are processed through awareness and acceptance. When you stop running from them, they lose intensity, and the need to overthink decreases. This is why slowing down your mind is so powerful, not to eliminate thinking, but to stop unnecessary mental repetition. A calm mind is not a blank mind. It is a controlled mind, a focused mind, a selective mind, one that thinks when needed and rests when not needed. As you begin practicing this awareness, you slowly notice something important. The mind does not need to be controlled forcefully. It needs to be understood. And once you understand it, you no longer feel trapped inside it. You begin observing thoughts instead of being consumed by them. You begin choosing responses instead of reacting automatically. And slowly, overthinking loses its grip. Not instantly, but gradually, like a habit dissolving through awareness and discipline. And in its place, something better begins to grow: clarity, calmness, and mental freedom. Chapter 8. Training your focus like a weapon. Focus is not something you are born with, it is something you train. And in today's world, focus has become one of the rarest abilities a person can develop. Most people believe they have a focus problem, but in reality, they have a training problem. Their attention has never been properly disciplined. It has only been pulled in every direction for years. From childhood, the mind is slowly trained to react to constant stimulation, quick entertainment, fast information, instant rewards, short bursts of pleasure. And over time, the brain adapts to this pattern. It becomes comfortable with switching attention rapidly. But deep focus requires the opposite behavior. It requires stillness. It requires patience. It requires sustained attention on one thing without interruption. And that feels uncomfortable at first for most people, because the brain resists anything that is unfamiliar. This is why many people struggle when they try to concentrate deeply. They sit down with good intentions. They open a task. They try to focus. But within minutes, their mind starts searching for distraction. A notification feels more interesting. A random thought feels more urgent. A small impulse feels more important. And suddenly, focus is broken. This cycle repeats again and again, not because they are incapable, but because their attention has never been trained. Focus is like a muscle. If you do not train it, it remains weak. If you train it consistently, it becomes strong. And just like physical training, mental training feels difficult in the beginning. But difficulty is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of development. Every time you resist distraction, you strengthen your focus slightly. Every time you bring your attention back to one task, you are training your mind. Every time you choose depth over distraction, you are building mental strength. Most people underestimate how powerful small repetitions can be. They expect dramatic change quickly. But focus is built slowly through consistent discipline. The brain rewires itself based on repetition. If you repeatedly switch tasks, your brain becomes a switching machine. If you repeatedly stay on one task, your brain becomes a deep focus machine. This is why your daily habits matter so much. Because your habits are literally shaping the structure of your mind. Modern life is designed against focus. Everything around you is competing for your attention. Notifications are designed to interrupt you. Social media is designed to pull you away from your work. Short-form content is designed to shrink your attention span. Even advertisements are designed to break your concentration. So if you feel distracted, it is not a personal failure. It is the environment you are in. But understanding this also gives you power, because once you recognize the forces pulling your attention away, you can begin building resistance. You can begin training your focus intentionally. One of the most important steps is learning to sit with discomfort, because deep focus is uncomfortable at first. The mind will resist it. It will search for escape. It will create excuses. It will try to convince you to stop. But this discomfort is temporary. If you stay with it, your brain begins adapting. The urge to switch decreases over time. The ability to concentrate increases, and eventually, focus becomes easier. This is how mental training works. Repetition creates comfort. Comfort creates stability. Stability creates mastery. Another important truth is that focus is closely tied to self-control. A distracted mind is often controlled by impulses. A focused mind is guided by intention. Every time you choose to stay on task, you are practicing self-control. Every time you resist an urge to check your phone, you are strengthening discipline. And discipline is what separates powerful minds from weak ones. Because a weak mind reacts immediately to every impulse, a strong mind evaluates before responding. This small difference changes everything in life. Focus also determines the quality of your results. A distracted hour produces very little value. A focused hour can produce meaningful progress. This is why some people achieve more in a day than others do in a week, not because they work more hours, but because they work with deeper attention. When your mind is fully engaged, your thinking becomes sharper, your decisions become better, your output becomes higher quality, and your confidence increases because you can see real progress. This creates a positive cycle. Focus improves results. Results increase motivation. Motivation strengthens discipline. Discipline improves focus again. And slowly, your entire life begins to shift. But this cycle only starts when you take control of your attention. Without control over attention, progress becomes inconsistent. You may work hard one day and get distracted the next. You may feel motivated for a short period, then lose direction again. This inconsistency prevents long-term growth. That is why focus must be trained deliberately. Not occasionally, but daily. One of the simplest ways to build focus is to reduce unnecessary switching. Stay on one task for a set period without interruption, even if your mind resists, even if you feel restless, even if you feel like stopping. Because the goal is not perfection. The goal is training. Every moment of resistance strengthens your mental endurance. Another important practice is becoming aware of distractions without immediately acting on them. When a distracting thought appears, notice it without following it. Do not fight it. Do not feed it. Just observe it and return to your task. This builds the ability to detach from impulses, and detachment is essential for deep focus, because most distractions are not external. They are internal reactions to external triggers. Learning to manage internal responses is what gives you real control. Over time, something interesting begins to happen. The mind becomes less chaotic. Thoughts become more stable, attention becomes more steady, and focus no longer feels forced. It becomes natural. But this transformation requires patience, because the brain does not change instantly. It changes through repetition over time. Many people fail to build focus because they give up too early. They expect immediate results. But mental strength is built gradually, just like physical strength. No one becomes strong after one workout, and no one becomes focused after one day of effort. It is the consistency that matters, the daily repetition, the repeated decision to stay disciplined even when it feels uncomfortable. That is what reshapes the mind. As your focus improves, you begin to notice changes in other areas of life. You become calmer under pressure. You think more clearly. You feel less overwhelmed. You make better decisions. And you start trusting yourself more. Because you know you can direct your attention intentionally, this creates a deep sense of self-control. And self-control is one of the foundations of a strong life. A person who cannot control their attention cannot fully control their direction, but a person who masters focus gains control over their actions, habits, and future. That is why focus is not just a skill, it is a form of power, and when you train it like a weapon, it becomes one of the most valuable abilities you will ever develop. Chapter 9. Why discipline creates mental freedom. Most people misunderstand discipline. They think discipline is restriction. They think it is pressure. They think it is a life full of rules that take away enjoyment. But in reality, discipline is the opposite of mental slavery. Discipline is freedom. because without discipline, your mind is controlled by impulses, and impulses are unpredictable. One moment you feel motivated, the next moment you feel lazy. One moment you want to work, the next moment you want to escape. One moment you feel focused, the next moment you feel distracted. If your life is guided by impulses, then your life is not truly yours. It is being controlled by temporary emotional states. This is why many people feel out of control in their own lives. They start things but cannot finish them. They make plans but cannot follow through. They set goals but break them easily. Not because they are incapable, but because discipline is missing. Discipline is the ability to act based on intention, not emotion. It is choosing what matters in the long term instead of what feels easy in the moment. And this is where real freedom begins. Because freedom is not doing whatever you want whenever you want. That is not freedom. That is impulsiveness. Real freedom is being able to do what is necessary even when you do not feel like doing it. It is the ability to guide your actions instead of being controlled by feelings. Without discipline, your emotions control you. With discipline, you control your emotions. This shift changes everything. Many people believe disciplined people are restricted, but disciplined people are actually freer than most, because they are not constantly pulled in different directions by every desire or impulse. They are stable, they are grounded, they are consistent, and consistency creates power. Think about a person who wakes up every day at a fixed time, follows a clear routine, works with focus, and avoids unnecessary distractions. At first glance, it may seem strict, but inside that person has peace, because their mind is not chaotic. They are not constantly negotiating with themselves. They are not arguing internally about what to do next. Their decisions are already aligned with their purpose. That removes mental noise. And when mental noise disappears, clarity appears. Clarity is one of the greatest forms of freedom, because confusion is a form of mental imprisonment. When you are confused, your mind feels heavy. You delay decisions. You hesitate. You second-guess everything. But discipline removes confusion by creating structure. Structure reduces decision fatigue, and when decisions become simple, life becomes lighter. Most people suffer not because life is complicated, but because their minds are undisciplined. They wake up without structure. They consume random information. They react to every distraction. They postpone important tasks. And at the end of the day, they feel mentally exhausted, not because they did too much, but because they did too little with focus. Discipline solves this problem. It gives your day direction. It gives your actions purpose. It gives your mind stability, and stability creates peace. One of the most powerful aspects of discipline is that it builds self-trust. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you strengthen your self-respect. Every time you follow through on a commitment, you build confidence. Every time you choose discipline over comfort, you reinforce identity. Self-trust does not come from words. It comes from actions repeated over time. When you repeatedly break promises to yourself, your mind stops trusting your decisions. You begin doubting yourself more. You hesitate more. You question your ability more. But when you consistently follow through, something changes internally. You begin believing in yourself without needing external validation. This internal trust is powerful, because a person who trusts themselves becomes stable under pressure. They do not collapse easily when things get difficult. They do not panic when challenges appear. They rely on their own consistency, and that stability creates mental freedom. Another important truth is that discipline reduces emotional chaos. Without discipline, emotions control behavior. Stress leads to avoidance. Boredom leads to distraction. Fear leads to hesitation. Desire leads to impulsive action. But discipline introduces a pause between emotion and action. That pause is powerful. It allows you to choose your response instead of reacting automatically. Over time, this builds emotional intelligence. You become less reactive, more stable, more grounded, and more in control of yourself. Discipline also improves focus, because a disciplined mind is not constantly searching for pleasure or escape. It is trained to stay on task. to remain consistent, to resist unnecessary interruptions. This creates deeper concentration and better results in everything you do. But perhaps the most important benefit of discipline is that it creates freedom from regret. Many people suffer not because of what they did, but because of what they did not do. Opportunities they avoided, habits they neglected, goals they abandoned, promises they broke to themselves. Regret grows when discipline is absent, because without discipline, people repeatedly choose short-term comfort over long-term fulfillment. But disciplined people reduce regret by taking responsibility for their actions. They do what needs to be done, even when it is uncomfortable. They stay consistent even when motivation is low. They keep moving forward even when progress feels slow. And over time, this creates a life they are proud of. Discipline also builds resilience, because when you train yourself to do difficult things regularly, discomfort becomes less threatening. You become mentally tougher. You can handle pressure better. You can manage stress more effectively. You can stay calm in situations that would overwhelm others. This resilience creates confidence, not the temporary kind based on emotion, but the stable kind based on experience. You trust yourself because you have proven to yourself repeatedly that you can handle difficulty, and that trust becomes unshakable over time. Many people think freedom means having no rules, but a life without rules is a life without direction, and without direction, the mind becomes lost. True freedom comes from choosing the right rules for yourself and following them consistently, not rules imposed by others, but rules aligned with your goals and values. This is self-discipline, and self-discipline is self-respect in action. Every disciplined choice is a message to your mind that your future matters more than your temporary comfort. And every undisciplined choice sends the opposite message. Over time, these messages shape identity. That is why discipline is not just about habits. It is about becoming the kind of person who can trust themselves completely, a person who does what they say they will do, a person who stays committed even when it is difficult, a person who moves with intention instead of impulse. That is mental freedom, not chaos, not randomness, but controlled, intentional living. And once you experience that level of internal stability, you begin to understand something important. Discipline does not take away your freedom, it creates it. Chapter 10. Escaping emotional weakness. Emotional weakness is not the same as feeling emotions. Everyone feels emotions. Everyone experiences sadness, anger, fear, and uncertainty at different moments in life. Emotional weakness begins when emotions start controlling your decisions instead of informing them. When a small feeling decides your entire behavior. When temporary moods determine long-term actions. When internal reactions override logical thinking. Most people do not notice this happening because it feels natural. Someone feels angry, so they react immediately. Someone feels sad, so they withdraw completely. Someone feels anxious, so they avoid responsibility. Someone feels unmotivated, so they stop working toward their goals. And slowly, their life becomes controlled by emotional shifts they never question. But emotions were never meant to be dictators. They were meant to be signals. Fear signals caution. Sadness signals loss or reflection. Anger signals boundaries being crossed. Discomfort signals growth. Emotions are information, not instructions. The problem begins when people confuse the two. They obey every emotional signal without thinking, and over time, this creates instability in their life. Because emotions are not stable, they change constantly. What feels urgent in one moment may feel meaningless in the next. What feels overwhelming today may feel small tomorrow. What feels like a disaster in the moment may turn out to be insignificant later. But emotionally weak minds treat every feeling as absolute truth in real time. This is why they struggle with consistency. They cannot maintain discipline because their emotional state keeps changing their direction. One day they are committed, the next day they are doubtful. One moment they are motivated, the next moment they are discouraged. And instead of staying grounded, they follow every shift. This creates a life of instability, but mental strength comes from stability. A strong mind does not deny emotions, it does not suppress them, it does not ignore them, it observes them, and then chooses how to respond. This simple difference creates massive change in life, because once you stop reacting automatically, you begin creating space between emotion and action, and in that space lies control. Most emotional mistakes happen because there is no space. The reaction is instant. Emotion appears. Action follows immediately. No reflection, no awareness, no choice. But when you build awareness, you begin to pause. That pause changes everything. It allows you to see clearly before acting. It allows logic to enter before impulse takes over. It allows you to respond instead of react. And responses are almost always more intelligent than reactions. Escaping emotional weakness starts with this awareness. You must begin noticing your emotional patterns honestly. When do you lose control? When do you react impulsively? When do your emotions override your decisions? These patterns reveal where your mind is untrained. Most people avoid this level of honesty because it feels uncomfortable, but awareness is the beginning of transformation. Without awareness, change is impossible. Another important step is understanding that emotions are temporary. No emotional state lasts forever. Even the strongest feelings eventually fade. But people often behave as if their current emotion will last permanently. They make decisions based on temporary states that shift within hours or days. This leads to regret, because once the emotion passes, the decision often feels wrong. Emotional strength comes from learning to recognize the temporary nature of feelings. You are not your emotions. You are the observer of them. This realization alone can change your entire relationship with your mind. Instead of saying, "I am angry," you begin to say, "I am experiencing anger." Instead of saying, "I am anxious," you begin to say, "I am feeling anxiety." This small shift creates distance, and distance creates control. Because when you become the observer, emotions lose their authority over you. They still appear, but they no longer dominate your behavior. Another major cause of emotional weakness is dependence on external validation. When a person relies on others for emotional stability, their internal world becomes fragile. A negative comment can destroy their mood. A lack of attention can create insecurity. A small rejection can feel like personal failure, because their sense of worth depends on external responses. But this creates instability that never ends. External conditions change constantly. People change. Opinions change. Circumstances change. And if your emotional stability depends on these things, your peace will always be unstable. Emotional strength requires internal grounding. A strong mind does not depend on constant approval. It does not collapse when someone disagrees. It does not lose identity when someone criticizes it. It remains centered even when external reactions fluctuate. This does not mean becoming insensitive. It means becoming stable. Another important step in escaping emotional weakness is learning not to act immediately on impulse. Every strong person understands the importance of delay. When emotions rise, they pause, they breathe, they wait. They allow intensity to pass before making decisions. Because emotional intensity always distorts perception. What feels urgent in emotion often loses urgency in clarity. This is why patience is a form of strength. It prevents irreversible mistakes, it protects you from regret, and it allows wisdom to guide action instead of impulse. Over time, this practice strengthens emotional control. You begin noticing that emotions rise and fall like waves. They come, they peak, they pass, and you no longer feel the need to react to every wave. Instead, you remain steady beneath them. Another important truth is that emotional weakness often comes from lack of direction. When a person has no clear purpose, emotions become more dominant because the mind has no higher structure to guide behavior. In that state, feelings become the main decision makers. But when purpose becomes strong, emotions lose control over direction. You begin acting based on long-term vision instead of short-term feelings. This creates consistency, and consistency creates strength. Escaping emotional weakness is not about becoming emotionless. It is about becoming emotionally intelligent. It is about understanding your inner world instead of being controlled by it. It is about learning that feelings are temporary experiences, not permanent identities. And it is about choosing actions based on values, not moods. This transformation does not happen instantly. It develops through repeated practice. Every time you pause before reacting, you strengthen control. Every time you observe instead of react, you build awareness. Every time you choose discipline over emotion, you grow stronger. And slowly, emotional chaos begins to fade. Not because emotions disappear, but because they no longer control you. And in that state, something powerful appears. Inner stability, the foundation of a strong mind. Chapter 11. Learning to control your reactions. Most people believe their reactions are automatic. Something happens, and they respond instantly. Someone says something hurtful, and they reply without thinking. A situation becomes stressful, and they panic immediately. A mistake happens, and they become frustrated right away. It feels natural. It feels normal. But it is not control. It is conditioning. A reaction is simply a learned pattern repeated over time. And if you do not train yourself, your reactions will be controlled by habit, emotion, and impulse instead of awareness. This is why many people regret what they say or do in emotional moments, because their reaction happened faster than their thinking. There was no pause, no space, no awareness, just automatic behavior. But between every stimulus and every response, there is a small gap. And in that gap lies your power. Most people never use that gap. They collapse it instantly. Stimulus becomes reaction without reflection. But mentally strong people learn to expand that gap, even slightly. And that small space changes everything. Because in that space, you are no longer controlled by emotion alone. You gain the ability to choose. Reactions are powerful because they feel instant. But instant does not mean correct. Many of the biggest mistakes in life happen in moments of reaction. Words spoken in anger, decisions made in fear, actions taken in frustration. And later, when emotions settle, clarity returns. But the consequences remain. This is why reaction control is essential for a strong mind. Learning to control your reactions begins with awareness. You must first notice how quickly you respond to situations. Do you speak immediately when you feel emotional? Do you act before thinking when something triggers you? Do you let your mood decide your behavior instantly? Most people do not realize how fast their reactions are. But speed is exactly the problem, because speed removes reflection, and without reflection, there is no control. The first step is learning to slow down internally, not physically, but mentally. When something triggers you, do not respond immediately. Pause. Even for a moment. That pause interrupts the automatic pattern. It creates space for awareness to enter. In that space, you regain control over your response. At first, this feels unnatural, because the mind is used to instant reaction. But with practice, the pause becomes easier, and the mind begins to slow down naturally in emotional situations. This is emotional training. Another important aspect of reaction control is understanding triggers. A trigger is anything that activates an automatic emotional response. It could be criticism, it could be rejection, it could be pressure, It could be unexpected change. Different people have different triggers based on past experiences, and most people are controlled by their triggers without realizing it. But once you identify your triggers, you gain power over them. Because what you understand, you can manage. What you ignore controls you. For example, if criticism triggers anger in you, then every critical comment becomes a moment of potential loss of control. But if you become aware of that pattern, you can begin changing your response. Instead of reacting immediately, you pause, you observe, you separate emotion from action, and over time, the trigger loses strength. It no longer controls you automatically. Reaction control is not about suppressing emotions. It is about delaying impulsive behavior until clarity returns. Because emotions rise quickly but settle slowly, and decisions made during emotional peaks are often distorted. This is why patience is a form of intelligence. It allows your mind to stabilize before you act. Many people underestimate the power of a simple pause, but that pause is where transformation begins. It is the difference between reacting like a machine and responding like a conscious human being. Another important idea is that most reactions are not necessary. A large number of situations in life do not require immediate response. Not every comment needs a reply. Not every situation needs an opinion. Not every emotional trigger needs engagement. But reactive people feel compelled to respond to everything. They believe silence is weakness, but in reality, silence is control. When you do not react immediately, you are not losing power, you are gaining it. Because you are choosing when and how to respond, instead of being forced into instant behavior. This creates emotional authority. Over time, people begin to notice something different about you. You do not react impulsively. You do not get easily provoked. You remain calm in situations that disturb others. This calmness creates respect naturally, because most people are used to emotional reactions. When someone does not react emotionally, it changes the dynamic completely. It shows stability. It shows control. It shows awareness. But this level of control only develops through practice. Every day gives opportunities to train reaction control. Small moments matter. A delayed response in conversation. A calm response under pressure. A thoughtful pause before replying. Each moment builds mental strength. And over time, these small practices reshape your entire personality. Reaction control also improves relationships, because most conflicts happen due to impulsive reactions. Misunderstood words, emotional replies, quick assumptions, escalation instead of reflection. But when you learn to pause, many conflicts never grow. You begin listening more carefully. You respond more thoughtfully. You avoid unnecessary emotional damage, and communication becomes clearer. Another important benefit is internal peace, because uncontrolled reactions create emotional chaos inside the mind. Regret, stress, overthinking, self-judgment. But controlled reactions reduce these patterns. You no longer carry emotional baggage from impulsive decisions. You begin feeling lighter internally, more stable, more centered. Reaction control also strengthens confidence, because when you trust your ability to stay calm, you stop fearing difficult situations. You know you will not lose control easily. You know you can handle emotional pressure. This confidence is not loud. It is quiet and steady. It comes from self-mastery, and self-mastery is built through repeated discipline. It is important to understand that controlling reactions does not mean becoming emotionless. It means becoming conscious. You still feel everything, but you no longer act blindly on everything you feel. You observe, you think, you choose, and that choice is where your real power exists. Most people live in reaction, but strong people live in response. Reaction is automatic, response is intentional. And intentional living is what separates a controlled mind from a chaotic one. Over time, as you practice reaction control, something changes deeply inside you. You stop feeling overwhelmed by external events. You stop losing yourself in emotional moments. You begin feeling more grounded in your identity, because you are no longer at the mercy of every situation. You are stable within yourself. And that stability becomes the foundation of a powerful life. Because when you control your reactions, you are no longer controlled by the world. You are controlled by awareness. Chapter 12. Building an unshakable inner world. Most people spend their entire lives trying to fix their outer world. They try to change their circumstances. They try to change other people. They try to change outcomes. They believe peace will come when everything outside becomes perfect. But the outer world is always changing. Nothing stays stable for long. People change. Situations change. Opportunities come and go. Loss happens. Success rises and falls. If your peace depends on external conditions, then your peace will always be fragile. This is why so many people feel unstable inside, even when things are going well on the outside, because they have never built an inner world that is strong enough to remain steady during change. An unshakable mind does not depend on perfect conditions. It creates stability from within. It builds a foundation that does not collapse when life becomes unpredictable. And this inner stability is what separates mentally strong people from mentally weak ones. A weak inner world reacts to everything. A strong inner world absorbs pressure without breaking. A weak mind becomes chaotic when life becomes difficult. A strong mind remains structured even during difficulty. But building this inner world is not something that happens automatically. It is trained over time. It begins with awareness. Most people live externally focused lives. Their attention is constantly directed outward. What people think about them, what is happening in the world, what they are missing, what others are achieving. Because of this external focus, their inner world remains untrained and unstable. They never learn how to sit with themselves. They never learn how to manage their thoughts. They never learn how to create internal peace. So when external chaos appears, they collapse internally. But when you shift your attention inward, something powerful begins to develop. You start noticing your thoughts instead of being consumed by them. You start observing your emotions instead of being controlled by them. You start understanding your patterns instead of blindly repeating them. This awareness is the foundation of an unshakable mind. Because what you understand, you can strengthen, and what you ignore controls you. Building an inner world means learning how to create stability inside yourself, regardless of external circumstances. It means becoming less dependent on external validation, less dependent on outcomes, less dependent on opinions, and more grounded in internal awareness. This does not mean disconnecting from the world. It means not allowing the world to define your emotional state. A person with a weak inner world can have a good day ruined by a single comment. A person with a strong inner world can experience challenges without losing emotional balance. The difference is not external, it is internal structure. One of the key components of an unshakable inner world is emotional stability. This means your emotional state does not fluctuate wildly based on small events. You feel emotions, but they do not control your entire identity. You can experience stress without becoming overwhelmed. You can experience disappointment without falling apart. You can experience fear without losing direction. This stability comes from understanding that emotions are temporary experiences, not permanent realities. Another important component is mental clarity. A chaotic mind is easily influenced. It jumps from thought to thought. It reacts quickly. It becomes overwhelmed easily. But a structured mind stays organized internally. It focuses on what matters. It filters unnecessary thoughts. It avoids mental clutter. And this clarity creates strength, because confusion is one of the biggest sources of weakness. When you are confused, you hesitate. When you hesitate, you lose momentum. And when you lose momentum, you feel stuck. But clarity restores direction. Another foundation of an unshakable inner world is self-awareness. Without self-awareness, you live reactively. You do not understand your triggers. You do not understand your habits. You do not understand your emotional patterns. So you repeat the same mistakes without realizing it. But with awareness, you begin to see yourself clearly. You understand why you react the way you do. You understand what affects your mood. You understand what strengthens or weakens your mindset. And this understanding gives you control, because you cannot change what you cannot see. Another important part of inner strength is self-validation. Many people depend on others to feel valuable. They seek approval constantly. They measure their worth through external feedback. But this creates emotional instability because external validation is never consistent. Sometimes people appreciate you, sometimes they ignore you, sometimes they criticize you. If your self-worth depends on that, your identity becomes unstable. But when you learn to validate yourself internally, something changes. You no longer need constant approval. You do not collapse when others disagree with you. You do not lose confidence when people misunderstand you, because your sense of value comes from within. Another crucial part of building an unshakable inner world is discipline. Discipline creates structure. Structure creates stability. Stability creates peace. When your daily habits are consistent, your mind becomes less chaotic. When your actions align with your values, your internal conflict decreases. When your routines are stable, your emotions become more balanced. Discipline is not just about productivity, it is about mental order. And mental order creates emotional strength. One of the most powerful truths is that your inner world is shaped by repetition. Whatever you repeatedly think, feel, and do becomes your internal environment. If you repeatedly consume negativity, your inner world becomes heavy. If you repeatedly practice focus, your inner world becomes sharp. If you repeatedly engage in self-reflection, your inner world becomes aware. This means you are constantly building your inner world, whether you realize it or not. The question is not whether your inner world is being built. The question is what you are building it with. An unshakable inner world does not mean life becomes easy. It means you become strong enough to handle difficulty without breaking internally. It means your stability is no longer dependent on perfect conditions. It means your peace is not easily disturbed by external events. This is real mental strength, not the absence of problems, but the ability to remain steady during problems. As your inner world strengthens, something important begins to change. External events lose power over your emotions. You stop reacting dramatically to every situation. You become more grounded, more centered, more consistent. And slowly, you begin experiencing a level of peace that is not dependent on anything outside yourself. This is the beginning of true mental freedom. Because when your inner world becomes stable, the outer world no longer controls your identity. You begin living from within instead of being shaped from outside. And that is what makes you unshakable. Chapter 13. The Daily Habits That Strengthen the Mind. A strong mind is not built in a single moment. It is built through daily habits. Small actions repeated every day shape the structure of your thoughts, your emotions, and your behavior. Most people underestimate this because daily habits feel too simple to matter. But simplicity is exactly why they are powerful, because what you do every day becomes who you are over time. Every thought you repeat strengthens a mental pathway. Every action you repeat strengthens a behavioral pattern. Every emotion you feed becomes more familiar, and slowly, without noticing, your identity is shaped by repetition. This is why two people with similar potential can end up living completely different lives. One person builds disciplined habits, the other builds distracted habits. One person trains focus daily. The other trains impulse daily. One person practices self-control. The other practices emotional reaction. And over time, these small differences create completely different mental realities. A strong mind is not accidental. It is built intentionally through consistent habits. The first habit that strengthens the mind is intentional focus. Focus is not natural in a distracted world. It must be trained deliberately. When you choose to concentrate on one task without switching constantly, you are training mental stability. Even small periods of focused work matter because focus is a muscle that grows with use. Every time you resist distraction, you strengthen your ability to stay present, and presence is the foundation of mental strength. Another important habit is controlled input. Your mind is constantly consuming information. What you watch, what you read, what you listen to, what you allow into your environment. All of this becomes part of your internal world. If your input is chaotic, your mind becomes chaotic. If your input is calm and structured, your mind becomes clearer. This is why protecting your attention is essential. Not everything deserves access to your thoughts. Another powerful habit is reflection. Most people live without reviewing their own behavior. They move through the day reacting, working, and consuming without ever thinking deeply about their actions. But reflection creates awareness. When you take time to think about your decisions, your reactions, and your patterns, you begin understanding yourself more deeply. And understanding leads to change. Without reflection, the same mistakes repeat endlessly. Another habit that strengthens the mind is emotional regulation. This means learning not to react immediately to every feeling. When emotions arise, you pause, you observe, you choose your response. This creates distance between emotion and action, and that distance builds control. Over time, emotional stability becomes natural. Another essential habit is discipline in discomfort. Many people avoid discomfort whenever possible, but mental strength grows through controlled discomfort. Doing difficult tasks even when you do not feel like it. Staying consistent when motivation disappears. Continuing effort when results are not immediate. These moments build resilience, because every time you choose discipline over comfort, your mind becomes stronger. Another habit is limiting distractions. Modern life is filled with constant interruptions, notifications, videos, messages, endless entertainment. If you do not control these inputs, they control you. Reducing unnecessary stimulation gives your mind space to breathe, and in that space, clarity grows. A calm mind is a powerful mind. Another important habit is solitude. Spending time alone without distraction allows your mind to reset. It helps you reconnect with your thoughts instead of constantly reacting to external noise. In solitude, you begin noticing patterns you usually ignore, your fears, your desires, your habits, your inner voice. This awareness strengthens self-understanding, and self-understanding is essential for mental growth. Another habit that strengthens the mind is consistency. Not perfection, consistency. Small actions repeated daily are more powerful than intense effort done occasionally, because consistency rewires identity. It tells your brain that this is who you are becoming. Every time you follow through on a commitment, you strengthen self-trust. And self-trust is one of the foundations of mental strength. Another important habit is slowing down your reactions. Instead of responding instantly to everything, you pause, you think, you choose. This habit alone can transform your emotional life, because most problems come from impulsive reactions, not situations themselves. Another powerful habit is mental discipline during boredom. Most people escape boredom immediately, but boredom is where focus is trained. When you learn to stay present without constant stimulation, your attention becomes stronger. You stop needing constant entertainment, and your mind becomes more stable. Another key habit is goal alignment. A strong mind needs direction. Without direction, energy becomes scattered. But when your daily habits align with clear goals, your mind becomes organized. You know what you are working toward. You know why you are doing it, and this reduces internal confusion. Another important habit is self-control in small moments. Not just big decisions, but small daily choices. Choosing not to check your phone immediately. Choosing to continue working instead of stopping early. Choosing patience instead of frustration. These small moments build discipline over time, and discipline shapes identity. Another habit that strengthens the mind is learning to observe thoughts. Instead of believing every thought automatically, you watch them, you notice them, you separate yourself from them. This creates mental distance, and distance creates clarity. You realize that not every thought is true, not every fear is real, not every impulse should be followed. Another important habit is gratitude and perspective. When you train your mind to recognize what is already stable in your life, emotional imbalance reduces. You become less reactive to minor problems and more grounded in reality. Another habit is controlled exposure to stress. Instead of avoiding all difficulty, you intentionally face manageable challenges. This builds resilience gradually. Your mind learns that discomfort is not dangerous, it is manageable. And that realization creates confidence. Over time, these daily habits combine to form a strong mental foundation. Not through one big change, but through repeated small actions. A strong mind is simply the result of consistent training, just like a strong body is built through regular physical exercise. There is nothing magical about it. It is repetition, it is discipline, it is awareness, and it is choice. Every day, you are either strengthening your mind or weakening it, through your habits, through your focus, through your reactions, through your decisions. And slowly these choices define who you become. A strong mind is not built in extraordinary moments. It is built in ordinary days repeated with discipline. Chapter 14. Pain creates power. Most people try to avoid pain at all costs. They see pain as something negative, something to escape, something to fear. But in reality, pain is one of the greatest forces that shapes human strength. Pain is not the enemy. Lack of meaning in pain is the real problem, because pain itself is unavoidable. Everyone experiences it: physical pain, emotional pain, mental pain, loss, rejection, failure, disappointment. These experiences are part of life. No one is exempt from them. But what separates strong minds from weak ones is not the absence of pain, it is the response to pain. Some people allow pain to break them, others allow pain to build them. The same experience can destroy one person and transform another. The difference is interpretation. When pain has no meaning, it feels unbearable. When pain has meaning, it becomes fuel. This is why mentally strong people often have difficult stories. They have been tested, they have been challenged, they have been forced to grow through discomfort. Not because they wanted suffering, but because they learned how to use it. Pain creates awareness. It reveals weaknesses you would otherwise ignore. It exposes emotional patterns. It forces reflection. And it pushes you beyond comfort zones that would normally hold you back. Without pain, most people would never change. They would remain stuck in the same patterns forever. Because comfort does not encourage growth, comfort encourages repetition, but pain interrupts repetition. It forces attention. It demands response. It breaks illusions. and it brings reality into focus. Many people discover their strength only after difficult experiences, after failure, after loss, after rejection, after moments that force them to question everything. At first, these moments feel destructive, but later they often become turning points, because pain strips away false identities. It removes illusions of control. It forces people to rebuild themselves more honestly. This is why growth often feels uncomfortable, because growth requires leaving behind the old version of yourself, and that process can feel like loss, but it is actually transformation. One of the most important truths about pain is that it can either weaken you or strengthen you, depending on how you respond. If you resist pain completely, it becomes suffering. If you avoid it, it grows stronger in fear. But if you face it directly, it becomes a teacher. Pain teaches patience. Pain teaches resilience. Pain teaches emotional control. Pain teaches self-awareness. Pain teaches humility. These lessons cannot be learned through comfort. They can only be learned through experience. This is why difficult moments often shape people more than easy ones. Easy times do not challenge identity. Hard times do. When life becomes difficult, your real character is revealed. Not the version you present to others, but the version you actually live through. Pressure. Some people collapse under pain. Others adapt. Some people become bitter. Others become stronger. Some people lose direction. Others find clarity. The same pain produces different outcomes, depending on mindset. This is why interpretation is powerful. Pain does not automatically destroy or build you. Your response determines its impact. A strong mind learns to ask different questions during difficult times. Instead of asking, "Why this is happening to me?" it asks, "What can I learn from this?" Instead of focusing only on suffering, it searches for meaning. This shift changes the emotional experience of pain, because meaning reduces helplessness, and helplessness is what makes pain feel overwhelming. When you feel completely powerless, pain becomes heavier. But when you feel like you are learning or growing, pain becomes more manageable. Another important truth is that avoidance increases suffering. When people try to escape pain at all costs, they often end up suffering more in the long run. Avoiding responsibility leads to regret. Avoiding discomfort leads to weakness. Avoiding challenges leads to stagnation. But facing discomfort builds strength over time. This does not mean seeking unnecessary suffering. It means not running from necessary growth. There is a difference between destructive pain and constructive pain. Destructive pain comes from harmful situations. Constructive pain comes from growth and discipline, but both can teach valuable lessons if approached correctly. One of the most powerful transformations happens when you stop fearing discomfort, when you realize that you can survive difficult emotions, that you can handle failure, that you can move forward even after setbacks. This realization builds confidence, because confidence is not built in comfort, it is built in survival. Every time you overcome difficulty, your mind learns that you are capable, and this belief becomes stronger over time. Pain also builds emotional depth. People who have experienced hardship often understand life more deeply. They become more empathetic, more grounded, more realistic, because they have seen both struggle and recovery. They know that emotions change, that situations pass, that nothing remains permanent. This awareness creates stability. Another important aspect of pain is that it forces growth through resistance. Just like muscles grow stronger under physical resistance, the mind grows stronger under emotional resistance. Without resistance, there is no development. Without challenge, there is no expansion. Without difficulty, there is no transformation. This is why avoiding pain entirely leads to stagnation. Life becomes repetitive, comfort becomes limiting, and potential remains unused. But when you face challenges directly, you expand your mental capacity. You learn new coping skills, you develop resilience, you strengthen emotional control, and over time, your identity changes. Pain also reveals priorities. When life becomes difficult, you begin to see what truly matters. Many unnecessary concerns disappear, and important things become clearer. This clarity often leads to better decisions in the future, because pain simplifies perspective. It removes distraction. It focuses attention on what is essential. Another important truth is that pain is temporary. No emotional state remains forever. Even the strongest pain eventually fades, but the lessons it teaches can remain permanently. This is why enduring difficult experiences with awareness is so powerful. You not only survive the moment, you grow from it, and that growth becomes part of your identity. A person who has learned from pain becomes stronger than before, not because life becomes easier, but because they become more capable of handling difficulty. This is the true power of pain. It does not just test you, it transforms you. And if you learn to face it instead of avoiding it, you begin turning suffering into strength. Not immediately, but gradually, through awareness, through reflection, through endurance, and through understanding. Pain is not the end of your growth. It is often the beginning of it. Chapter 15. Becoming the master of yourself. Every journey eventually leads to one final truth. You are responsible for your own mind, not your past, not your environment, not your circumstances. Not the people around you, but you. This realization is the foundation of self-mastery. Most people spend their lives looking outward for control. They try to control situations. They try to control outcomes. They try to control other people. But they ignore the one thing they actually have full control over: their own mind. And because of that, they remain dependent on external conditions for their emotional stability. When things go well, they feel fine. When things go wrong, they collapse. When people approve of them, they feel confident. When people reject them, they feel broken. This is not mastery. This is dependence. True power begins when you stop outsourcing your emotional state to the external world, when you stop allowing circumstances to define your identity, and when you start taking full responsibility for your inner world. Self-mastery is not about controlling everything outside. It is about controlling what happens inside you, regardless of what happens outside. It is the ability to remain steady in chaos, focused in distraction, calm in uncertainty, and disciplined in discomfort. This is not something you are born with. It is something you build through awareness, through repetition, through discipline, through conscious choice. Every chapter of this journey has pointed to the same direction. Control your attention, control your thoughts, control your emotions, control your reactions, control your habits. Because when you control these, you control the direction of your life. The world will always be unpredictable, life will always change, challenges will always appear, but your internal response does not have to be unstable. A strong mind learns to remain grounded even when everything around it is shifting. This is what it means to be the master of yourself. Not perfection, but stability. Not absence of emotion, but control over emotion. Not absence of fear, but the ability to act despite fear. Self-mastery begins when you stop identifying completely with your thoughts. You are not every thought that enters your mind. You are the observer of those thoughts. You are not every emotion you feel. You are the awareness behind those emotions. You are not your impulses. You are the one who chooses whether to act on them. This separation is powerful, because once you stop becoming your thoughts, they lose authority over you. You begin to see them clearly instead of being consumed by them, and in that clarity, control becomes possible. Most people live as if they are their thoughts. If the mind says, "You are not good enough," they believe it instantly. If the mind says, "You will fail," they accept it without question. If the mind says, "You should quit," they obey immediately. But thoughts are not commands. They are mental events. They come and go. And you have the ability to choose how to respond to them. Self-mastery is the ability to create distance between thought and action. That distance is where freedom exists, because without distance, there is no choice, only reaction. And reaction is what keeps people trapped in cycles they do not want. The master of the mind understands something simple but powerful. You do not need to obey every thought. You do not need to react to every feeling. You do not need to follow every impulse. You can observe. You can pause. You can choose. And in that choice, your life changes direction. Self-mastery also means building trust in yourself, not based on motivation, not based on emotion, but based on consistent action. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, trust increases. Every time you choose discipline, identity strengthens. Every time you act according to your values instead of impulses, self-respect grows. And over time, you become someone you can rely on completely. This internal trust is rare, because most people break small promises to themselves every day. They delay tasks. They avoid responsibility. They give in to distraction. They abandon commitments easily, and slowly, they lose confidence in their own ability to control their lives. But self-mastery reverses this pattern. It builds reliability from within. It creates consistency between intention and action. It removes internal conflict, and it replaces chaos with structure. Another important part of mastering yourself is emotional independence. This does not mean disconnecting from people. It means not depending on them for your emotional stability. You can love people, you can connect with people, you can care deeply about others, but your sense of identity does not collapse based on their opinions or reactions. You remain grounded even when external validation changes. This creates strength, because a stable mind cannot be easily controlled. Another key part of self-mastery is resilience. Life will challenge you, not occasionally, but repeatedly, and resilience is what allows you to recover without losing direction. A resilient mind does not break permanently under pressure. It adjusts, it learns, it continues forward, and this ability is developed through experience and repetition. Every challenge you face builds resilience if you choose to learn from it. Self-mastery is also about alignment. When your thoughts, actions, and values are aligned, internal conflict decreases. You feel more consistent, more stable, more clear. But when your actions contradict your values, internal tension increases. This tension creates mental discomfort. So alignment is essential for peace. One of the final truths of self-mastery is that it is not a destination. It is a continuous practice. There is no moment where the mind becomes permanently controlled. There is only ongoing awareness and discipline. Every day requires attention. Every day requires choice. Every day requires reflection. But over time, these practices become natural. What once required effort becomes identity, and what once felt difficult becomes normal. This is how transformation becomes permanent, not through sudden change, but through consistent evolution. The master of the mind understands that external life will always be unpredictable, but internal stability is always possible. And that stability becomes the foundation for everything else in life. Because when your mind is under control, your life follows, not perfectly, but intentionally. And in that intentional living, something powerful appears. Freedom. Not freedom from challenges, but freedom within them. Freedom from impulsive reactions. Freedom from emotional instability. Freedom from mental chaos. Freedom to choose your response. Freedom to shape your direction. And ultimately, freedom to become who you decide to be. This is the final lesson. To master your mind is to master your life. And once you understand this deeply, you no longer search for control in the outside world. You begin building it within yourself. And that is where true transformation begins. And now you've reached the end of this journey into the mind. But in reality, this is not the end. It is the beginning of awareness. Because everything you have learned here is not meant to be consumed once and forgotten. It is meant to be practiced, repeated, and lived every single day. Mastering your mind is not a moment of change. It is a daily decision. The decision to stay aware when your thoughts try to control you. The decision to stay disciplined when emotions try to pull you off track. The decision to stay focused when distractions fight for your attention. And the decision to keep moving forward even when it feels uncomfortable. Nothing outside of you will change your mind permanently. Only your actions will, only your habits will, only your consistency will. So as you move forward from this audiobook, do not try to become perfect. Try to become aware. Do not try to control everything at once. Start with small control over your attention, your reactions, and your daily choices. Because that is where real transformation begins, step by step, day by day, moment by moment. If this message helped you, make sure to subscribe to Bookwaves Audio for more powerful audiobooks like this. And remember this, your mind is not your enemy, it is your greatest tool, but only if you learn how to use it. Stay focused, stay disciplined, and stay in control of your mind. Until next time.